The morning began like any other for Nanton, a young Apache scout known more for his silence than his spear. The sun had barely crested the red cliffs when he rode out to check the water lines along the dry riverbed. The desert was quiet, almost gentle. The kind of quiet that sinks into a man's bones and makes him forget trouble exists at all, but trouble has a way of finding its own path. Nanton noticed the dust trail long before he saw the traveler. A lone pack mule, a man slumped over its back, moving toward Apache territory like he had no idea or no choice. When the rider came close, Nanton recognized him. Marlowe, a trader who wandered between forts, mines, and ranches, dealing in whatever earned coin. The man's breath was shaky, his shirt torn, and his left hand pressed against a bleeding shoulder. Marlowe didn't greet with words. He simply lifted his head, saw Nanton, and gasped, You have to help her." Nanton felt the air shift. "Who?" "The bride," Marlowe wheezed. "They took her. They're forcing her to marry one of them. She's somewhere near the canyon forks. I tried to stop them." A bride taken by raiders. The claim was not new. Bands of outlaws roamed the borders, snatching supplies, cattle, and sometimes people. Most brides were taken for ransom, some for darker reasons. And every Apache warrior was taught, when a woman is taken, you ride. But something in Marlowe's story felt too rushed, too messy. Still, the man was bleeding, and time was not a luxury Nanton could afford. "Where?" he demanded. Marlowe pointed with shaking fingers toward the jagged granite ravine. "North Fork. Old camp by the willow spring." He sucked in a breath. "I heard her screaming." That was enough. Nanton gave the trader water and tore a strip of cloth to slow his bleeding, then mounted his horse. His braid brushed his back as he leaned into the saddle, urging the mare forward. He did not look back. If a woman was being forced into a marriage she did not choose, every moment mattered. The land changed quickly as he rode. The open plains narrowed into a twisting maze of rock and shadow. Heat shimmered between the boulders. Ravens circled overhead, calling warnings Nanton did not need. The canyon fork was infamous. Raiders used its walls as cover, its spring for water, its silence to hide screams. Nanton slowed as he neared the willow spring. He dismounted without sound, moving between rocks like a shadow. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife. He listened at nothing. No voices. No struggle. No sign of a forced wedding. Instead, he saw a torn bit of cloth snagged on a mesquite branch. A woman's cloth. White, but stained with dust and something darker. His pulse tightened. He circled the camp remains, dead fire, scattered tracks, prints from at least 3 horses. And then he found her. She lay half shielded by a fallen log, as if the earth itself had tried to hide her. Not in a bridal dress. Not in ribbons or lace. Just simple traveling clothes, ripped at the seams, her hair tangled with dirt. One arm lay twisted beneath her, her cheek swollen purple. Rope burns circled her wrists. She did not stir when he knelt beside her dot, so this was the bride. No, this was a discarded woman, beaten, left to die, far from any celebration. Nanton pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse faint but steady. Relief swept through him, swift and fierce. The trader's story was a lie or a misunderstanding. Whoever had taken this woman did not leave her for marriage. They left her for silence. Nanton lifted her carefully into his arms. "You're not a bride," he murmured. "But you will not die here." He turned toward his horse, already knowing this rescue would lead him into something far deeper than the story he'd been told. The woman's weight was feather-light in Nanton's arms. But every step he took down the canyon path felt heavy with questions. She was breathing shallowly, each breath sounding like it scraped against broken ribs. Her clothes were not those of a bride. They were simple, rough-spun traveling garments, the kind worn by women who worked, not women who waited at altars. Dust clung to her skin, and streaks of dried blood marked her sleeve and collar. When Nanton reached his horse, the Mare snorted softly at the unfamiliar scent. He secured the woman carefully across the saddle, adjusting her so her head would rest against his chest when he mounted. Even unconscious, she flinched when his hand brushed her wrist, an instinctive recoil. That told him more of her story than any words could. He mounted behind her, wrapped one arm around her to keep her steady, and began the slow ride away from the spring. For a long time, the only sounds were the clop of his Mare's hooves and the faint rattle of her breath. Nanton kept scanning the distant ridges for movement. Raiders did not simply abandon a captive, it was not their way. Either they were nearby or they had fled because something worse had happened. After some time, the woman stirred Dot at first. It was a twitch in her fingers. Then a low sound, a whimper carried on a broken inhale. Nanton slowed the horse and angled his head to hear her. Water. She whispered so faintly he almost thought it was the wind. He dismounted immediately, lifted her off the horse, and sat her upright against a sandstone boulder. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone. The left side of her face was swollen, the bruise deepening from violet to black. Her lips were split. She looked like someone who had not only been beaten, but beaten by men who enjoyed it. Nanton held a waterskin to her mouth. At first, she didn't respond, but when a trickle touched her lips, she drank greedily, coughing halfway through. He steadied her until she finished. When her eyes finally opened, they were a pale blue that looked wrong against the violence done to her. They darted around wildly until they locked on him, an Apache warrior, sitting inches away. Fear hit her like a lightning strike. She recoiled, trying to push herself backward, but her strength failed and she collapsed partly into his arms. No, please, don't. I will not harm you, Nanton said softly, lowering his hands to show he meant no threat. You are safe. She stared at him as if unsure whether to believe him or to scream. Her voice cracked. Where are the others? The men who... She swallowed hard, wincing. Are they here? No, Nanton said. I found you alone. A wave of relief washed over her, so strong she sagged forward, catching herself on the ground. She closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to shut out memory itself. What is your name? He asked. She tried to answer. Her mouth opened. No sound came. After a moment, she shook her head confused, afraid. I can't. Nanton realized the truth. It wasn't that she refused to speak her name. She couldn't remember it. Whether from injury, shock, or terror, her identity had been torn from her mind. He felt the air grow colder. A woman with no name was a woman nobody would look for. A woman nobody could defend. A woman raiders could throw away without consequence. He reached into his saddlebag and retrieved a thin blanket, draping it over her shoulders. She stiffened at first, then slowly relaxed into its warmth. We ride, Nanton told her gently. I will take you somewhere safer. She looked up at him with eyes filled not with trust, but with a desperate, fragile hope, like someone clinging to the last branch. Above a cliff. She didn't know who she was, but she knew she wanted to live, and so she nodded, letting him lift her once more onto the horse, her body trembling, her mind a tangle of fear and fragments. Nanton mounted behind her, holding her steady as they rode deeper into Apache land, unaware that this nameless woman would soon pull him into a conflict, far darker than any he'd ever faced. The ride began in silence, but it did not stay silent for long. The woman leaned against Nanton's chest, her breathing shallow, her body trembling each time the horse stepped over a stone. She was conscious now barely, but she did not speak. She stared forward with hollow eyes, as if afraid that blinking might throw her back into the nightmare she had escaped. Nanton kept one arm firmly around her, not possessive, but protective. Every few moments, he glanced over his shoulder, scanning ridgelines, brush, and shadows. His instincts were prickling sharp, alert, restless. The canyon did not feel empty. The air felt wrong, like smoke you could not see yet. Half a mile from the willow spring, the horse jerked its head and snorted. Not at a snake, not at a predator, at danger. Nanton slowed to a stop. The woman tensed against him. What is it? Quiet, he murmured. He slid off the horse, lifting her down gently. Her legs buckled, and she clung to his arm. He guided her behind a cluster of rocks, then returned to the trail. He crouched low, pressed his ear to the earth, and waited. At first, nothing. Then hooves. Far away, but approaching fast. More than one horse. Light riders moving with purpose. Not a peaceful travel group. Raiders rode like that, quick, searching, prepared for violence. Nanton's jaw tightened. They were coming back. He returned to the woman. We cannot stay here. Her eyes widened. Are those the men who? Yes, she swallowed a cry. He lifted her back onto the horse and mounted behind her in one motion. This time, he did not ride the main path. He yanked the reins sharply and steered toward the broken, narrow ridge to the west, dangerous terrain for anyone unfamiliar with it. The raiders would expect him to flee east, toward settlements. They would not expect him to take the woman deeper into the maze of Apache land. As they rode, the woman clutched at his shirt. Her hand shook so violently that her nails scraped his skin. They're coming for me, she whispered. They're coming. They will not take you, Nanton said. His voice was calm, even steady as stone. Not while I breathe. The horse galloped through a tight passage between two cliffs, hooves kicking up dust. The sounds behind them grew louder, shouts now. Male voices, angry, hunting. The woman pressed her head into his shoulder, trying to make herself smaller, as if shrinking might hide her from the world. Nanton urged the horse faster. They reached a fork in the path, one leading downhill toward the riverbed, the other upward along a dangerous slope choked with boulders. The riverbed offered speed. The slope offered invisibility. He took the slope. The horse struggled but obeyed, climbing steadily. Nanton used his free hand to push aside branches and guide them around rock outcroppings. The shouts behind them grew faint, then louder again, echoing strangely, as if the raiders were unsure which trail to follow. Good. The woman whispered, Why? Why are they after me? I wasn't worth anything. They said I wouldn't fetch a price. She trembled violently. So why? Do not speak of their words, Nanton said, not unkindly. Their minds are twisted. They will twist yours if you let them. She fell silent. At the top of the slope, he pulled the horse into a thicket of juniper and waited. His heart thudded with adrenaline, but his breathing stayed slow. Moments later, 3 riders appeared far below, dark shapes moving fast along the main trail. They did not look up. They did not suspect the slope. They thundered past, curses echoing between the rocks. Only when the last rider disappeared into the canyon bend did Nanton exhale. The woman sagged in relief, but tears began to drip silently down her face, fear draining out of her body drop by drop. Nanton kept watching the canyon even as he spoke softly. They hunt you because they lost something, he said, not because you have no value. To them, losing what they believe they own is an insult. They chase not for you, but for pride. She shivered, understanding more than she wished. Nanton finally turned the horse away from the ridge and guided them toward the hidden trails his people used, safe paths unknown to outsiders. The raiders would keep looking, but Nanton would not let them find her. Not now. Not ever. The sun was sliding lower in the sky by the time Nanton allowed the horse to slow. The woman's breathing had steadied, but her body leaned heavily into him, drained by fear and exhaustion. He guided them toward a narrow ravine where a small spring trickled from between two boulders, a hidden place Apache scouts used during long journeys. He stopped in the shelter of the rocks, slid off the horse, and lifted her down with care. She winced when her feet touched the ground, pain shooting through her legs as if her bones had forgotten what standing meant. He steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "You will rest here," he said gently. The woman nodded weakly, sinking onto a patch of soft sand. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the heat of the day. The wind brushed strands of hair across her face, sticking to dried blood and dirt. She looked like a ghost of herself, someone who had been alive only days before, now hollowed out by terror. Nanton filled a small clay cup from the spring and handed it to her. She drank slowly, as if savoring the simple act of swallowing cool water. When she finished, she lowered the cup but didn't hand it back. She just stared at it as if afraid that dropping it might shatter her. "We are far from danger now," Nanton said. "They will not find this place." Her lips parted, but she hesitated. Words seemed to gather in her chest. Trapped behind fear, Nanton waited. After moments that felt like minutes, she finally whispered, "My name." "It's Evelyn." The way she said it, soft, trembling, made him realize she had only just remembered it. Her memory was returning in pieces, fragile fragments rising to the surface like small bubbles in still water. "Evelyn," he repeated, letting the name settle between them. "You were not a bride." She shook her head hard, tears pooling suddenly in her eyes. "No, not a bride. I was traveling with a wagon train. I mend clothes seamstress work. I was supposed to meet my aunt in Tucson." Her breath hitched. "The raiders came at night. They killed 2 men before anyone could shout." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth as memories rushed back. Raw and sharp, Nanton knelt on one knee, not too close, but close enough for her to feel that she wasn't alone. "You escaped," he said softly. Evelyn nodded. "When the men started arguing, they were drunk, fighting over who would take me." Her hands shook violently. "I ran when they weren't looking. I hid in the rocks, but one found me." She lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing a deep bruise forming on her shoulder. "He dragged me back. Said no one would buy a woman who fought too much, so they'd use me instead." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They beat me for running." Nanton's jaw tightened with controlled fury, but he kept his voice calm. "You did not deserve what they did." She let out a shaky breath, the words clearly something she needed to hear. "When the fight broke out again," she continued, "I crawled away. I think they hit me on the head. Everything after that is a blur." She touched the back of her skull, wincing. "I remember falling, then nothing until I woke in your arms." "You were left behind," Nanton said. "Not by choice." Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. "They'll come for me. I know they will. They said no one escapes them." "Many escape," Nanton said. His tone was firm, steady, like a stone set in the ground. "But you are not escaping alone now." The words made her look at him, truly look at him, for the first time since he found her. Her eyes searched his face, trying to determine whether he meant the promise or simply said it to calm her. Nanton did not break eye contact. "You will not be taken again." Her throat tightened, but not with fear this time. Something else flickered there, something like fragile hope. For the first time since he found her in the dirt, Evelyn allowed herself to believe she might survive this. She looked down at the cup in her hands and whispered, "Thank you." Nanton stood and glanced at the sky, knowing night would bring new dangers, but not the kind that rode horses. Whatever the darkness held, they would face it together, The hidden ravine gave them cover. But nightfall brought a sharp chill that seeped into the rocks. Nanton gathered dry mesquite branches and built a small fire small enough to stay hidden, warm enough to keep Evelyn from shivering uncontrollably. She sat close to the flames, wrapped in his woven blanket. Her knees pulled to her chest. He cooked a simple meal of beans and crushed maize in a tin pot. Evelyn watched quietly, her fingers tracing the stitching of the blanket as if grounding herself in its softness. When he handed her a bowl, she took it with both hands, whispering a cautious thank you. Her voice was still fragile, but steadier than before. At first, she ate slowly, wincing each time the motion tugged at bruised ribs. But hunger won, and soon she finished every bite. Nanton handed her water again, and she drank it without fear this time. When she finished, she looked at him, studying his face in the flickering firelight. "I thought," she said quietly, "when I first saw you, that you were one of them, or that you'd take me back to them." Nanton lifted his eyes to hers. "Would you believe me if I said such a thought never crossed my mind?" Evelyn's lips parted, unsure how to respond. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything feels broken." "You are not broken," Nanton said simply. She inhaled sharply, as if the words hit some core of her she'd forgotten existed. She looked away quickly, pretending to busy herself with the empty bowl, but her hands shook again. Nanton did not press her. Instead, he stood and moved to the edge of the ravine, scanning the canyon beyond. He checked every ridge, every shifting shadow. He moved with the quiet precision of someone trained since childhood to read the wilderness like a map. Evelyn watched him, noticing how he did not pace or fret. He simply observed, like a guardian making sure the world dared not come near. After several minutes, he returned to the fire and sat across from her. "You check for them often," she murmured. "Until I know they are far behind," he replied. "Fear grows in darkness, but danger grows in silence." She swallowed. "Do you think they're still searching?" "Yes," he answered honestly. "But we are ahead of them. They do not know this land." He paused. "And they do not know you have someone who will not let them find you." The words made her blink quickly, tears threatening again. But she fought them down. She was tired of crying. "I don't understand why you're helping me," she said suddenly. "You don't know me. You don't even know where I came from." "You needed help," Nanton said. "That is enough." She let out a shaky laugh, one without humor. Men don't usually help without wanting something back. Nanton's expression remained calm, unreadable. "Not all men." Silence settled between them, not heavy but thoughtful. The fire crackled softly. After a moment, Evelyn pulled her blanket tighter. "Will you stay awake?" The question came out raw, as if she feared rejection. "Yes," Nanton said without hesitation. "Sleep. I will watch." She exhaled a breath she had been holding since sunset. Slowly, she lay down on the sandy ground beside the fire. She curled onto her side, still tense, still expecting nightmares or footsteps in the dark. Nanton shifted his seat so that he faced both her and the ravine entrance. He sat cross-legged, spear resting across his lap. His profile was steady against the fire's glow, unmoving, vigilant. Minutes passed. Evelyn's breathing remained uneven. Every rustle of wind made her flinch. "Evelyn," Nanton said gently. She opened her eyes a little. "Yes?" "You are safe tonight." The simplicity of the statement, spoken with absolute certainty, wrapped around her like a second blanket. Her trembling eased. Her breaths deepened. And for the first time since the attack, she drifted into real sleep, still wounded, still afraid, but no longer alone. Nanton remained awake long into the night, eyes sharp, heart steady, guarding the woman who had finally stopped running. And though she did not yet know it, trust had taken its first fragile root between them. Morning arrived slowly, dripping gold over the canyon walls. The chill clung to the air, but the first rays of sunlight brought warmth that coaxed color back into the world and into Evelyn's face. She blinked awake, disoriented at first, eyes darting to the ravine walls, then to the fire's faint embers. When she spotted Nanton still seated in the same place as the night before, she pushed herself up on one elbow. "You didn't sleep," she whispered. He shook his head. "Sleep comes later. Your safety comes first." Evelyn's expression softened, but she didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt too small a word. Nanton stood and stretched quietly, the morning light sharpening the lines of his profile. He walked to a nearby patch of scrub oak, examining faint tracks in the dust. Evelyn watched him move silent, purposeful. He seemed made of the land itself. When he returned, she asked, "Are they close?" He shook his head. "No fresh tracks. They followed the wrong trail yesterday. We bought time." Relief washed over her, but then another question rose. "And what now?" Nanton regarded her for a moment. "Now," he said, "you heal, and you decide where you wish to go." Evelyn pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "I don't know where that is. I don't even know if my wagon train survived. My aunt doesn't even know I left the last town. I feel like I have nowhere." "Everyone has somewhere," Nanton replied, "but sometimes the path to it is long." She sighed, staring at her scraped hands. "I don't feel strong enough for a long path." "You crossed a canyon alone," he reminded her. "You are already stronger than you think." The words steadied her more than she wanted to admit. A pain that runs deeper than bruises. As the morning warmed, Evelyn tried to stand. She managed one step before a sharp pain shot through her side. She gasped and clutched her ribs. Nanton was at her side instantly. "Sit," he instructed. She tried to protest out of pride more than anything, but her legs trembled. She sank back down, frustrated. He knelt and examined her ribs carefully, his touch gentle but precise. She winced. 2 ribs bruised, maybe cracked, he murmured. "Your shoulder is swollen." "And your head?" He touched lightly behind her ear. "You took a strong blow." "So no walking," she said weakly. "No long walking," he corrected. "You can still move, and we will go slow." He moved to his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. Inside were herbs, dried plants, and strips of linen. Evelyn watched, surprised. "You know healing?" she asked. "Enough. To mend wounds from arrows and falls," he said with a faint glimmer of humor. "Enough for this." He brewed a tea from crushed willow bark and yerba buena. The steam smelled minty and earthy. When he handed her the small clay cup, she hesitated, then drank. The bitterness made her grimace. "It will ease pain," he said. "Why does everything that helps taste terrible?" She muttered. He folded a strip of cloth into a band and wrapped it around her ribs, securing it carefully so she could breathe without sharp spikes of pain. Evelyn watched him work. Something warm stirring deep inside her trust, yes, but something else too. A feeling of being cared for. No one had cared for her like this in a long time. A question she fears to ask when he finished bandaging. He sat back on his heels. "We will ride again when the sun rises higher," he said. "There is a place my peoples camp. They will help you." Evelyn froze. "Your people?" She swallowed hard. "Will they want me there? A stranger?" The word almost caught in her throat. "A white woman?" Nanton met her gaze calmly. "My people honor those who are harmed. You will not be turned away." "But what if they think I bring danger?" she whispered. "Danger follows you," Nanton said. "But I follow it too. I do not fear it." Evelyn's eyes stung. She looked away, biting her lip. There, in the quiet of the ravine, with sunlight warming her bruised skin and the echo of Nanton's promise in her ears, she realized something. She was beginning to feel safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because she was no longer facing it alone, night seeped across the desert like a slow-moving shadow, settling over the tiny canyon hollow where Tahoma and the woman now known to him as Nalin had camped. The small fire crackled low, its light flickering against her face as she sat wrapped in the blanket he'd given her. She looked stronger than the first day, but there was still a tired slump to her shoulders, a quiet tremble she tried to hide. Tahoma watched her from across the fire, sharpening his knife, pretending not to notice. He had learned that if he did not look directly at her, she sometimes relaxed. She feared many things, but the worst seemed to be being seen. A long silence passed before she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" She had asked before, but always in a defensive tone, sharp, wary, ready to lash out. Tonight her voice was different, softer, as if she were bracing herself for an answer she feared, and needed at the same time. Taom sheathed the knife. "Because someone should have helped you long before I arrived," he said simply. Her gaze dropped to the blanket. "You don't even know what happened to me." "I don't need to know. Pain speaks without words." For a moment she seemed ready to argue, but the firelight revealed something else: relief. As if she had carried a burden for so long that any kindness felt unreal. Still, she shook her head. "If you knew, you would leave me." Tahoma leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "If I wanted to leave, I would have done so before the storm. Before we crossed the ridge. Before you told me your name." She blinked fast, startled by the steadiness in his voice. "You should not trust me," she murmured. "I may bring danger to you." "You already did," he answered with a small smile. "But I am still here." That caught her off guard. She bit her lip, fighting the instinct to cry. He saw the battle in her face, the desire to remain hard and the desperate need to crumble for just a moment. She had been strong for so long she had forgotten what softness felt like. The fire cracked. A silence stretched between them, warm and fragile. Then, slowly, as if each word cost her strength, she said, "They took me. The men who were supposed to escort me to my husband. They sold me to raiders instead. I escaped only because they thought I was too broken to fight." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Tahoma didn't flinch. Not a muscle moved. She waited for him to recoil, to judge her, to call her ruined every reaction she had been taught to expect. When he did none of that, she wrapped her arms tightly around her knees, confused. "You are not broken," Tahoma said quietly. "You survived something meant to destroy you. That is strength." "Strength?" She whispered bitterly. "I ran. Running is not weakness. It is choosing to live." The words hit her like a strike to the chest. She pressed a hand to her mouth, holding back a sob, shoulders trembling. She turned away from him, ashamed to show tears. But Tahoma rose, walked around the fire, and sat beside her, not touching, simply close enough that she could feel the warmth of another human being. "If you cry," he said softly, "I will not look away." Nalin let out a broken breath. And for the first time since he had found her among the dust and blood, she allowed herself to cry, not in fear, not in despair, but because at last someone stayed. The morning air was sharp, carrying scents of sagebrush and distant earth. Nalin had slept longer than she ever had since her escape, and the small firelight reflected a faint flush on her recovering face. Tahoma had not slept much, if at all. Every ridge, every shadow in the canyon beyond had been counted and measured in his mind. Danger could strike at any moment, and he knew the raiders were relentless. He had hoped for a few quiet days, enough to allow her strength to return, but the tracks he found at dawn told a different story. Shallow depressions in the sand, broken twigs, and the faint drag of a rope someone had followed them, testing the trails, probing their escape. They were close, too close. "Tahoma," Nalin said, voice trembling but firm. "They're coming, aren't they?" "They are," he admitted. He squatted beside the tracks, pointing out the faint imprints of horses' hooves. 3, maybe 4. Skilled riders. They are cautious, but determined. They've lost patience. They will not wait long. Nalan's hands shook as she ran them over the surface of a smooth boulder. I can't run anymore. I can't. You won't have to, he said. We will face them on our terms. Her eyes widened. Face them? She stopped, unable to finish the thought. The memory of every lash, every blow, every terror-filled night pressed on her. Tahoma's voice was calm, but every word was firm. You do not fight alone. I will not let them take you. You are stronger than you think, Nalan. You survived once. You will survive again, and this time we take back what they tried to steal from you. She swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. Part of her wanted to run, as she had done before. But part of her, the deeper, quieter part, wanted to stand. To reclaim her life, her voice, her body. They began preparations. Tahoma moved quickly, directing her to a sheltered boulder outcrop that overlooked the narrow trail below. He handed her a bundle of sharpened sticks, crude yet effective weapons, and a small coil of rope. You may need these, he said. Nalan examined them carefully, her hands trembling. I've never fought before, she whispered. You have survived worse, Tahoma said. This is not about skill, it is about will. Together, they made a plan. When the raiders arrived, they would be guided into the narrowest part of the canyon, where the boulders would give them cover and limit the attacker's advantage. Tahoma would engage them directly if necessary, but Nalan would not be left in a corner to cower. She would have a role, a choice to fight if she could, or to act strategically to save both their lives. Hours passed. Every sound of wind, every rustle of brush, made Nalan flinch. Tahoma stayed beside her, quietly monitoring the trail. He spoke little, but each word was measured, reassuring. Finally, the shadow of horse hooves appeared far below. Tahoma pointed and whispered, They are here. Remember your place. Remember your strength. Trust yourself. Nalan nodded, feeling a surge of something she had not felt in months. Courage. Not reckless courage, but quiet, deliberate courage. She was not the frightened woman left in the dirt. She was not a pawn in the raiders' cruel game. The first rider came into view, shouting orders to the others, confident that fear would guide their prey. But this time, they had miscalculated. The prey was no longer powerless. Thoma and Nalan exchanged a glance, no words necessary. They were ready. The canyon would bear witness to a fight born not from hatred, but from the unwavering determination to survive and to reclaim what was stolen. The first horse appeared around the bend just as the sun rose, spilling golden light into the canyon. The rider shouted, a harsh, commanding voice that carried across the narrow pass. Tahoma and Nalan crouched behind jagged boulders, their eyes fixed on the men who had caused so much pain. Fear was there, yes, but it was tempered by something far stronger, determination. Tahoma tightened his grip on the spear, checking the tension of his muscles. Nalan's hands were steady now, her earlier trembling replaced by focus. She clutched the sharpened sticks he had given her, ready to act when the moment came. The raiders came in 3 groups, expecting an easy confrontation. They had assumed the woman they had beaten and abandoned was weak, broken, and terrified. They were about to learn otherwise. The first man, unaware of the ambush, stepped into the narrow pass. Tahoma acted quickly, moving like a shadow over the rocks. In a swift motion, he knocked the man off balance, sending him sprawling into the sand. The other riders halted, confusion breaking through their confidence. Nalan watched, her breath held, heart pounding. Tahoma's movements were precise, deadly, but not reckless. Every strike was measured, meant to stop the threat, not to spill unnecessary blood. She felt a strange surge of courage rising inside her, a desire not only to survive but to help him protect the canyon that had become their refuge. One of the raiders lunged toward them, attempting to flank Tahoma. Nalin raised the sharpened stick instinctively and jabbed at the man's arm, making him stumble back in surprise. Her hands shook for a moment, but she steadied them. Another man approached, shouting threats and swinging a knife. Tahoma intercepted, but the man was bigger, stronger. In that instant, Nalin acted without thinking. She threw a small rock from her bundle, hitting the larger raider squarely on the temple. He stumbled, giving Tahoma the opening to disarm him. The second man, witnessing the unexpected courage of the woman they had thought powerless, hesitated. The battle became a whirlwind of movement, rocks, and shouted commands. Tahoma moved with silent efficiency, while Nalin, despite her fear, began to find rhythm in the chaos. Each action, ducking, jabbing, throwing, reminded her that she was no longer the frightened woman left behind. She was an equal participant in her own survival. One of the raiders, the leader, attempted a desperate charge toward Nalin. Tahoma, now wounded in the shoulder from a glancing strike, staggered but remained upright. Seeing him falter, Nalin stepped forward, her fear overridden by instinct. She threw her stick with all her strength, hitting the man squarely in the side, causing him to cry out and stumble. Tahoma seized the moment, knocking the leader unconscious. The remaining attackers, realizing their plan had failed, began to retreat, their confidence shattered. Nalin dropped to her knees, gasping, and Tahoma steadied her with an arm around her shoulders. "You fought well," he said, voice low but firm. "You were brave." She shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. I didn't know I could do that." He smiled faintly. "You didn't know because no one had let you try. You are stronger than you realize. Stronger than they believed. Stronger than even you believe." Nalin exhaled, the tension in her body slowly unraveling. She looked at the canyon walls, the scattered bodies of those who had threatened her life, and felt something she hadn't in a long time: control. The terror, the helplessness, the despair of the past weeks had not disappeared. But it had been tempered by courage and action. For the first time, she understood that survival was not just about fleeing or hiding. Survival was about standing, fighting, and taking back what had been stolen. Tahoma surveyed the scene, his body weary but his spirit steady. "It is over," he said. "For now." Nalin nodded, still catching her breath. "For now," she repeated. And for the first time since the attack, she believed it. The canyon was quiet again, save for the soft rustle of wind through juniper trees and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. The battle had ended, and the raiders had retreated, their threats silenced for now. Nalin sat on a boulder, her hands resting on her knees, watching the horizon. The adrenaline had ebbed, leaving her exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in weeks, she felt as though she might truly breathe again. Tahoma approached silently, his own body marked by bruises and scrapes, but his posture steady, commanding in its calm. He stopped a few paces away and waited, giving her the space to process everything that had just happened. She turned to look at him, her pale blue eyes reflecting a mixture of awe, gratitude, and something she had not felt in a long time: hope. "You were brave," he said simply. Not a compliment, but an acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. "I was scared," she admitted softly. "Terrified. I kept thinking I'd fail, that they would take me again." "And yet you did not," Tahoma replied. "You fought. You stood. You protected yourself and me. That is courage." Her lips quivered, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. "I never knew I could." She trailed off, the words failing to capture the mix of relief and empowerment swelling in her chest. Tahoma stepped closer, but still gave her the space to breathe. You are not just a survivor, Nalin. You are someone who takes her life back. You fought for yourself today." She looked at him, and for the first time since their paths had crossed, she did not feel like a fragile woman. She felt like someone alive, whole enough to make her own choices. The canyon stretched endlessly before them, red cliffs glowing in the early afternoon light. Nalin's mind wandered to the world beyond, the town she had yet to reach, the aunt she had feared she might never see again, the life she had once imagined but now felt distant. And yet, in that moment, the path forward seemed less terrifying because she was not alone. Tahoma knelt beside her and rested a hand on the rock near hers. "You can return to the town. You can go wherever you choose. I will escort you if you wish. But the choice is yours." Her heart skipped. She had assumed she would follow him home, or that he would demand she come. But now, hearing his words, she realized he was giving her something rarer than protection: freedom. She hesitated. "I don't know where to go, but I don't want to run anymore." "That is wise," Tahoma said. "Running protects life. But standing, facing the world, that is how you live it." Nalin exhaled, a laugh escaping a small, shaky sound that felt unfamiliar to her own ears. I want to stay here a little longer. Just to understand who I am now." Tahoma's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Then we stay. As long as you wish. There is nothing more I can give than the choice to be free and the strength to remain that way." For the first time since she had been found battered and nameless, Nalin allowed herself to look forward instead of back. She felt her bruises ache, but they were reminders, not chains. She had been broken, beaten, and hunted. And yet she had survived. She had fought. She had reclaimed herself. Tahoma watched her from across the firelight, knowing that the journey had changed them both. A story that began with fear and violence had grown into one of quiet trust, resilience, and the beginnings of something deeper, though neither dared to name it yet. Nalin turned to him, eyes bright with something approaching certainty. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." "You were never alone," he said. The canyon stretched around them, vast and silent, yet alive with promise. The world beyond was uncertain, dangerous, and unpredictable. But for the first time in her life, Nalin felt the certainty of choice. Courage and hope died, and in that stillness, with the wind in the rocks and the sun warming her bruised skin, she understood that some beginnings were born from the hardest trials and that life, no matter how cruel, could be reclaimed.